You are listening to Dove Valley Deep Divers with Erick Trickel
and Lance Sanderson.
Ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
On Overtime Media.
And it looks like we are live. Going to give John just a second to get everything ready to go here. Wait for a green check mark on the super fan group. John's giving me the thumbs up. Thank you, buddy. We appreciate that. Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as always, rocking that raspberry peace tea, which I appreciate that, is my good friend and colleague, your Denver Broncos insider, Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, I'm away from home right now. I'm out visiting my family and having some fun. What are you up to, man? How you been? How's everything going up there in Alaska?
Been doing really well. Just finishing everything up for the holidays, and we just had our last big shopping trip for that and everything, and just getting excited for, Christmas and everything. Daughter's at that fun age, 3 years old, to
there you go,
really enjoy Christmas and everything, and she's getting excited about it. So just looking forward to that. Looking forward to the draft that's coming up and quickly approaching on us, because quite frankly, this season hasn't been the best seasons. I mean, the last few haven't been. And as a senior draft analyst, I'm always looking forward towards the draft, and this year especially so.
Yeah, no, it's totally understandable. Things are not necessarily looking great in Broncos country right now, sitting at 4-8 and coming off a frustrating loss. Like, let's be honest here. It's that we've heard it so many times over the last couple of days. And the fact that there's no moral victories, these players want to win, the coaches want to win. You watch the Broncos go into Kansas City and finally be competitive for the first time in what seems like forever. They had a chance to win the game late. Drew Lock threw another interception, which, you can't fault the guy for that one. The first one, however, is another one of those repeated mistakes that we see all the time. But still, with the way that the Broncos are shaping up right now, we're going to break this down for you guys here over the next 4 games anyways. But the way things are shaping up, it's not a lot of optimism right now. You can talk to the youth and you can talk to the growth that we've seen from everybody, the injuries having the CV impact and everything like that. It's been just kind of an up and down and really frustrating season. So at this particular point, we're into December, and to break down the rest of the schedule, there's an outside chance the Broncos can make the playoffs. They would need a lot of help to be able to do so. They're not mathematically eliminated right now, but there is an outside chance that they could do so. But what's more realistic in this potential scenario over these next 4 games? If the Broncos do win out and they go 8-8 and they get some help to get in the playoffs, or do they go 0-4 and they finish the season 4-12? And in my personal opinion, somewhere in between. And my personal opinion is going to be somewhere in between that. They're not going to lose every game. They're going to win at least one more, probably 2, or they're going to. It's more likely them to go to the 0-4 side of things than the 4-0 side of things. But before we get everything going here, guys, I got to finish out some matters of business really fast. You guys are watching the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Follow me at Sanderson MHH on Twitter, for Erick at Erick Trickel. Also, guys, while you are at it, follow at DVDD_pod. It's the easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Also, follow at Mile High Huddle for instant news and analysis, film breakdowns, opinion articles on your Denver Broncos from all of your favorite Mile High Huddle personalities. If you guys are financially able to do so and are willing to do so, not to beg for anything here, not to push you in the wrong direction, head on over to the merch tent. HuddleUpPod.com. That's where you can get yourself a Dove Valley Deep Divers hat or that T-shirt that Erick's rocking right there. There's a face mask, a hoodie, coffee cup, something for the guys, something for the gals. You go a onesie for your baby. There's something for everybody at HuddleUpPod.com. If you're a Facebook supporter, become a supporter. Go to Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle. Click the blue Become a Supporter button. It's an easy way to show your love and support for Mile High Huddle and what we're doing here with the Huddle Up Podcast Network as well. If not, subscribe wherever you guys are watching this, whether it's YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys see, and if you love it, share it. It's the easiest way to help grow the network and what we do here at Mile High Huddle. It's the easiest barometer. It's the most organic thing that you can do to help the show grow. And also, as always, guys, Tonight's show, tonight's live stream is brought to you by sportsbetting.com. As we know, gambling is legal in the state of Colorado, and sportsbetting.com is a no-brainer for sports fans. They have sharp odds, low juice, in-house bookmakers, which means they're not a third-party provider of the odds, and the reduced juice means they have the best prices. There's hassle-free bonuses with a one-time rollover, meaning that the bonus money is yours after you bet it one time. They have 24/7 live customer support with a live person, a real person in the United States every single time you call. So if you have any issues, call their customer support staff. They'll point you in the right direction. But guys, here's the kicker. At sportsbetting.com, you guys can get a risk-free week of sports betting, 100% risk-free week of sports betting, up to $1,000 on not just one bet, but every single one. You guys want to run a 9-team parlay, drop $1,000 on that, and lose it? Guess what? Sportsbetting.com is going to cover that difference 100% up to $1,000 with a one-time rollover. So head on over to www.sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. Capitalize on that risk-free week of sports betting and go win yourself a little bit of money. Like there's some money to be had out there. There's some easy bets you can go and take advantage of. Over-unders, they have a lot of different ways that you can create some interesting bets, yardage totals, fun prop bets, and stuff like that. Sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. Go check it out, guys.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
That was rough, gang. But listen up. Coors Hard Seltzer is not your average seltzer. Rooted in Coors' long history of sustainability is a brand inspired by a generation that wants to do good in the world with a mission to restore America's rivers. Never before has it been so easy, so simple, and yet so enjoyable to make a difference in the world. Coors Hard Seltzer is launching the world's easiest volunteer program. Whatever you're doing, by simply cracking open a can of Coors Hard Seltzer, you're volunteering. Our waterways, gang, are at risk. 80% of America's rivers are drying up, but through a partnership with Change the Course, Coors Hard Seltzer is helping to protect and restore America's rivers. Each 12-pack of Coors Hard Seltzer restores 500 gallons of fresh water to U.S. rivers and communities that depend on them. The results? 1 billion gallons of water restored to 16 river basins across the United States, including the Colorado River, and that's just year one. You get 4 refreshing flavors, 1 cool cause, enjoy naturally flavored black cherry, mango, lemon lime, and grapefruit. And the specs are in, gang. Coors Hard Seltzer is 4.5% ABV and only 90 calories, Zach, another pro.
Yeah, Chad, you mentioned it before. The second week in a row, another tough loss by the Broncos, but another opportunity for me for the second week in a row to enjoy a nice Coors Hard Seltzer. Last week it was mango. This week it was black cherry. I love them all, though, Chad. It really makes a losing effort in the NFL that much more palatable.
So join the world's easiest volunteer program, gang, by simply drinking Coors Hard Seltzer. Broncos country, you can volunteer to restore America's rivers. You buy Coors Hard Seltzer, you help restore 500 gallons of water into America's rivers all on your own. It's that simple. Visit CoorsSeltzer.com to find a Coors Hard Seltzer near you. That's CoorsSeltzer.com.
For every 12-pack sold through 8/31/2021, Coors will purchase services from Change the Course to restore 500 gallons of fresh river water. Details at CoorsSeltzer.com. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Fort Worth, Texas.
All right, now, Eric, now that we're done with all of that, what is your most likely scenario in this outcome? Do you think that the Broncos are going to lean towards the 0-4 side of things, or are we going 4-0? Before we get into this.
I think that the Broncos end up finishing the season with 5 wins. 6 wins obviously wouldn't be shocking. There's 2 winnable games on it. I don't think they win more than 2. But I really feel that either they beat the Panthers this week and lose to the Chargers, or they lose to the Panthers and beat the Chargers. Either way,
right?
The Bills game and the Raiders game, I think those are going to be a little bit more tough for them to pull out.
Yeah, Stephen Baumgartner says 2-2 and finishing with a, what does that make them, 6-10, a 6-10 record. That's where I'm at right now. I think they obviously have an opportunity to win this Chargers game. It would not surprise me if they did. I did pick the Panthers. Go to milehighhuddle.com, check out the roundtables we put up every single week. I picked the Panthers this week, but I called it a coin flip game. I think that there's some matchups the Broncos can exploit. I don't like the road game, the 11 o'clock early time is just never been a a boon for the Broncos. They've never had a whole lot of success in the early time frame. So that's my thing. Kansas City's a different thing, but going all the way, the big travel and everything like that, throwing off their entire schedule, that's the big thing. And I think they do beat the Chargers. But we're going to break this down in a worst-case scenario first, because obviously numbers work that way. 0 means you have a higher draft pick. The Broncos, if they do go 0-4 over these next 4, going to land up at 4-12, and they're probably going to end with a 4 and so in the 4 to 6 range in the NFL draft. At that particular point, and Eric, I don't know if you agree or disagree with me, but if you're in the 4 to 6 range, given what we know about Drew Lock, and especially if the Broncos do lose these next 4 games, Drew Lock is probably going to have an impact in that. Quarterback. It's got to be quarterback. What are the guys?
So, yeah, if the Broncos lose out, which, again, neither one of us think is the likely scenario to happen. It's just one of the scenarios we're going to talk about. You got to be looking at quarterback, because at that point it means that Drew Lock, even if he's shown some flashes over it, he hasn't shown the consistency needed to keep rolling with him. And you got to get somebody to compete with him at the very least. And this way, you go into next year, while the quarterback that you draft is probably the guy you're going to roll with, you still have Drew Lock there to push him and be pushed by him, and you just let them compete it out. It's what a lot of people felt that Arizona was going to do with Kyler Murray and Josh Rosen there for a while before everything became clear that they were going to actually trade Josh Rosen. And Denver would be in a good position too, because there's 4 quarterbacks in this that I think that are worth top 10 picks. And I think that the Cincinnati Bengals, I think they're likely to be picking ahead of Denver. And I think the Dallas Cowboys will probably pick ahead of them. And I think that they're both going to be looking at offensive tackles or secondary help in the case of the Cowboys. I think that would be the 2 ways that they go.
Right.
So obviously you have the Jets and the Jaguars. I mean, who knows which way the Jaguars go. If the Jets end up with the number 1 pick, it's going to be Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
He's going number 1 overall. And if with the Jaguars, I mean, they can go Trey Lance, they can go Zach Wilson, they can go Justin Fields. It really depends on just how they go.
Right.
But each of those 3 quarterbacks, they all have something to offer. I don't think that Justin Fields was very high on the Broncos board for multiple reasons. That I don't think that they would go that way. I think that they'd probably go maybe defense over him. I mean, there's been a lot linking to Micah Parsons, and he could be a get for them. They could go corner. They could even possibly look at trading down, which I think if they end up with a top 10 pick, that's something that's underrated. An underrated move that a lot of people aren't thinking that they'll do very well. But Trey Lance, he's got all the physical tools. He's got the raw tools. Very not a 1-to-1 comparison, and I always hate doing comparisons for this reason. But I see a similar pathway to success with Trey Lance as what the Bills did with Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. And that's building the scheme out completely around him. Doesn't matter offensive coordinator, what their scheme is it's got to be thrown out the window, and it's got to be built around that quarterback. It's got to be built around Trey Lance. You got to use his legs, and you got to work with him. And just Dak Prescott's another quarterback that he's compared to. I think Nick Kendall used that comparison there, and I can see it. Some of the deep ball accuracy and placement is a little bit rough with Trey Lance there. Now, Zach Wilson, he's a guy who I think is a little bit more scheme versatile, but he's a guy that you do want to have some rollouts. You want to have a moving pocket. You want to use his athleticism and his legs as to help you around. I mean, not saying you run with him all the time, but just something that you can do and just see what. And he offers up a lot more than Drew Lock does. I mean, he's a better prospect than Drew Lock, so he would be a good one to push him. And he's got better placement. The downfield arm isn't as good as Drew Lock, but he has better timing, he has better anticipation and better placement, and he does a lot better on the underneath throws, those under 10s and those 10 to 15, 10 to 20-yard throws as well. And then Justin Fields, he's a guy who he's got some good legs. I mean, you can do a very similar – I mean, again, Josh Allen, you can do a similar thing as the Bills did with Josh Allen with building a scheme around him, what the Panthers did with Cam Newton. You can kind of do that thing with him. I think that he's got a better arm and being a better quarterback prospect than Cam Newton was coming out of Auburn. But there's still some limitations there. He still relies on one read. You'd want to really throw in run-pass options into the air offense and use those with him. And at least early on, make reads very simple as he just grows and develops with his ability to read quarterbacks. Now, if they end up with that high of a pick and they don't go quarterback, say it's a reason where despite the defense playing as well as it has, say Drew Lock goes out and completely balls over these last 4 games, but the defense falters or the offense around him falters. Look kind of like the New England Patriots game where he had those really good deep passes that were dropped, things like that. And just things where it's not on Drew Lock. I still think that they would probably go quarterback early. I wouldn't write off them if they pick a top 10 year that they won't take a quarterback. In fact, I know it shouldn't be written off. But if they don't go quarterback, then there's plenty of options. I mean, Micah Parsons was mentioned. I think that Penei Sewell will probably be gone by there. Rashawn Slater, he's a guy who I think is very deserving of a top 10 pick, possibly top 5. I mean, if you want a versatile offensive lineman, there you go. For me, that's a little bit rich for Denver. I mean, they have their 5 starters for 2021.
Yeah,
and I don't want to spend a top 5 pick, top 6 pick as a depth guy for 2021. You can go edge rusher, but you can go cornerback. Just a lot of different options. Gregory Rousseau, Caleb Farley, Micah Parsons. Again, I'll keep coming back to him. And just throw it out there. And Denver's not going to do this. But if they really wanted to boost the receiver core even more, Jamar Chase. I mean, that's not going to be. That's not that. I'm comfortable saying that's not going to happen. But he's a name to consider.
Yeah, there's just a lot of different things that the Broncos can do. You can bolster some strengths. Obviously, we're not sure exactly what's going on with the Von Miller situation. I know last week we talked about Micah Parsons and the potential possibility of him being an athletic edge player, like the Leonard Floyd role that the Chicago Bears wanted to use Leonard Floyd in, that athletic guy that can kind of drop back in the coverage if you need him to, but is a guy that has a quality blitzer, a guy that can read and react and stuff in the run and stuff like that. I can understand that kind of a thing. Gregory Rousseau is another big guy there. I just think that, and this is my personal opinion, guys, and if you guys really want the hot take, I'll throw it out there. I said earlier this week that Drew Lock is at least not the guy. I don't think he is. It's not necessarily because the flashes are bad. It's because the bad stays bad. There's no growth in from the bad to the good. He's still making the same boneheaded decisions, throwing into triple coverage, missing open receivers underneath. There's a lot of different things that I need to refine this take a little bit. Went back and rethought it just a little bit over the last few days. He's not the guy right now, and he's still going to get the next 4 games, and he could potentially show me that he's the guy. But also at the same time, if he's going to show me that he is going to be the guy, he needs to have those positive flashes on a more consistent basis, and the negative flashes need to be erased. Like, it needs to be a damn near perfect game from him over the next 4 games, period. Like, he has to show that kind of growth, that not incremental growth, major growth. It has to happen for him immediately, in my opinion. So if you're at 4-12, you got a top 5 pick, top 6 pick again. Like, you have to be looking at the quarterback position there. If you don't go and get a Sam Darnold, at least, like, you have to be looking at least having that hedge your bet. I would rather prefer the Broncos go and get a Sam Darnold and then open up some options in the first round. Go get a Gregory Rousseau if Penei Sewell falls. I don't like that pick, and there's a reason why is because Juwan James is there, and I don't see Penei Sewell playing on the left side. I also don't see Garrett Bowles flipping to the left side. You have 2 left tackles there, and I don't think that it's going to work. One of those guys is not going to flip to the other side. Maybe if you let Juwan James start 2021 and Penei Sewell sits behind him and learns and can flip his footwork and then play on the right side, then sure, you're not switching Garrett Bowles. After the growth that he's shown at left tackle, you're not putting him on the right side because that erases everything that he has shown. At least Sewell is young enough that he can relearn that technique. So to me, I'm looking defense, man. I'm looking Micah Parsons. I'm looking Caleb Farley. I know you don't like Patrick Surtain in the first round, at least for the Broncos.
For no.
What about another linebacker like a Dylan Moses or that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah?
Now, real quick before I get to that, I do want to address this since I did mention receiver. If Denver drafts a wide receiver in the first round, Elway is Matt Millen 2.0. They have invested enough in wide receivers. And Joshua Walsh also added Judy, Sutton, Hamler, and Fant is more or less a wide receiver with the body of a tight end. That's more than enough. No, Fant isn't more or less a wide receiver in a tight end's body. He is very much a tight end, and that his blocking is actually really improving this season.
It's improving a lot.
And Tim Patrick, isn't mentioned, but Tim Patrick's a restricted free agent who after 2021 is going to be a free agent. And guess who else is going to be a free agent then? Cortland Sutton. And then Jerry Judy, I know it's his rookie year. He'll have next year too. But he's had 5 drops this year, and his play hasn't been the best. I mean, we got to see the development from him, and he's going to have next year too. KJ Hamler, again, same kind of thing as Jerry Judy. So it's not a over investment in it. It's keeping a strength, especially with how much financial investment is possibly coming over the next couple of years with Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick. If you go and get Jamar Chase, then it's easier to let one of those go or both of them go. And then also if Jerry Judy or KJ Hamler fail, then you also have a fallback guy in Jamar Chase. And Jamar Chase could take this offense to a completely different level, which is another reason why he would be considered. But again, as I said earlier, is I highly, highly doubt they'd go receiver the round one. I do think they draft a receiver, but probably day 3. But as for linebackers, Dylan Moses would be outside of Micah Parsons. He's the one I'm looking at. He's got all the tools, all the traits that you want to be a true 3-down linebacker. The issue is that he just overthinks things. He's got to just slow down, just play the game, not think things, just read, react, do what he needs to do. That's the biggest thing with him. And then with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame, he's a little bit light. He plays, from what I understand, he plays about 220, 225. But if you play him next to Alexander Johnson, you can actually make him be effective. Similarly to how Vic Fangio worked with Roquan Smith around Danny Trevathan. Terrible with names. How you work around that. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be taking on blocks, but you want him to sort through the trash and find the ball carrier. Very read and react type, see and chase kind of. That would be his role in Denver. Both of them, I think, are very worthy of top 10 picks. But I want to add a caveat to that. With Dylan Moses, it's really going to come down to how those medical checks. I've heard different things about those. Nothing concrete really to say one way or the other. But with his injury last year, that is something that's obviously it's going to have to be factored into.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
I'm going to answer this super chat here. David Kilgore brought this up. Thank you for joining us, David. Thanks you to everybody. Really fast. Miller 707 champ in the house. Kenneth Booker has been throwing some questions around. Charlie Beagle as well. What's up, guys? We appreciate you all for joining the Dove Valley Deep Divers. David, though, coming in here, and he says, what do you guys think of the prospects of getting either Wentz, Stafford, Haskins, or Darnold? Or is our best chance at quarterback is the draft? I kind of touched on this just briefly a second ago. I would rather the Broncos go out and trade for Sam Darnold. Quite honestly, the market seems right. The price is right as far as the money is concerned. The Broncos don't have a whole lot of cap space, but they can still fit Sam Darnold in under this because they're not paying Drew Lock a lot of money. Also, I'm not sure exactly what happens with AJ Bouye, though I'd like to see him restructured and come back with the team on a smaller number than the $13 million he was going to get next year. Jarrell Casey, another guy that I like to see restructured rather than released, but it's more than likely he's going to be let go. So that's going to open up a little bit of room. But with Justin Simmons needing paid, Shelby Harris needing paid, some other guys, you've got Alexander Johnson needs a tender, Tim Patrick needs a tender, Philip Lindsay needs to have a tender. There's some money that needs to be thrown around. You're not going to be able to manage a trade for Matthew Stafford, who is the golden child there. Also, I don't want to throw multiple first-round picks, which I think is probably what's going to take, at least a first this year and maybe a first next year. You might get away with a second. But Matthew Stafford, that the money there, if you take on that kind of a contract, you're missing out on either one of or both of Justin Simmons and Shelby Harris. Like you're not going to be able to fit those guys underneath. So to me, it's Sam Darnold because you're going to give up a third and a fifth more than likely. That's what the market is per Benjamin Albright. And you also have the cheap rookie first round contract right now. So if you're going to go and get a guy for some competition, Darnold seems to be the guy. And the reason I say this is because this part of the reason why I'm not sold on Drew Lock right now and probably won't be sold on him for the rest of his career. At least Sam Darnold is playing in a terrible situation. And like that offensive line is absolutely horrible. But he still continues to make the correct plays, the correct throws. He makes the right reads. He delivers the football on time. He's not the problem. There's no argument for Sam Darnold being the problem with that Jets offense. There's no weapons to throw to. Jamison Crowder's one guy. The offensive line is absolutely terrible. They're banged up and they're beaten and battered and bruised. And Sam Darnold's gun shy. That's a big thing. When he was playing early in the games, look at what happened against the Raiders last week. Sam Darnold played tremendously in the first half. Then the offensive line gave up, and Sam Darnold had nowhere to deliver the football to, had no time to throw the football, and it looked terrible. To me, you put Sam Darnold in this offense and you give him a true legit shot, because the Broncos offensive line is actually really good. They're gelling right now, big time. They've got a lot of weapons for him to distribute the football to. You let him grow a little bit within this offense, challenge Drew Lock. You run into it with that and still keep your first-round pick to get a blue-chip talent and add to this team that has some holes at the linebacker position, at the cornerback position. If you get Darnold and Lock, run a true quarterback competition and work with it like that, may the best man win. That's the win-win scenario.
Yeah, so there's a couple questions here or comments here that I want to talk about real quick. Big E Bronco, Lock is the future in Denver. It's bad offensive play calling. They leave the NFL and taking shots at 20 yards or more. When you get third down, you don't go down the field every time. Bad play calling. On those third down plays, when they take those deep shots, that's Drew Lock. That's not the play. Watch the play. You have the underneath receiver, and typically they're open. Drew Lock is looking at the deep shot. It's not Pat Shurmur. And this is something it's become a big pet peeve of mine, and Pat Shurmur by no means is doing a great job.
No.
But it's so easy to say a failed play is because of the play caller. It's so easy to do that, and it's not as black and white as that. When the play caller calls a play that has two deep shots, a intermediate shot, and an underneath shot on third down, it's on the quarterback to go through the progressions, and typically your first read or your second read is the underneath guy who's just short of the third down sticks or the first down sticks. And the reason for that is just because of how defenses play third downs. They want you to throw short of the sticks, and they come up and they make the play. It's pretty basic stuff. And it's just Drew Lock. He's not coming off that deep shot. He's looking for those underneath guys. That was a big issue against New England. Even though those passes were not bad passes and they were dropped, he was missing an open guy underneath that just set the play back a little bit. Yep. So can't fault him there exactly, but at the same time you can a little bit. Yeah. And that's been the case all season. Now, Pat Shurmur's issues are going a little bit beyond that. It's about how his usage of other players are, the role that he has with KJ Hamler, the role that he has with Jerry Judy. It's not the best fitting for their skill sets. And that is how he's hurting Drew Lock.
Yeah.
It's not with the play calls directly, because Drew Lock is he's the one that's missing the open guys. He's the one making the bad reads out there on the field. But Pat Shurmur needs to use the weapons better.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting you. This goes to Keegan's point here. Noah Fant is a great weapon on the field, and he can make big plays. He needs to start using them more. It's misusage by Pat Shurmur, really. This actually goes to a little bit on the Drew Lock conversation, because Noah Fant's open a lot. Like, he is getting open. He's open over the middle of the field, same side of the play. They're designing stuff to get Noah Fant involved in the passing game. Drew Lock's missing him, but there is some misusage stuff there as well. I love the crossing routes, but I want to see him stretch the seam one time. Like, why are we not seeing a front side bang 8 post with Noah Fant stretching the seam? Like, where is that at?
And there's a lot of different time was Deshaun Hamilton running those deep routes.
Exactly.
Like, there's a lot of things that you can say. It's not just Fant; it's with everybody.
Yeah, there's some synergy issues. There's some cohesion issues that's going on with this Broncos offense, and I understand that. And I understand that you got to watch these young players grow, and I understand that there's probably some time for Drew Lock to grow in there as well. However, you've seen growth from some of these other players. You want to talk about some flaws really fast, and before we get to 1 and 3 and move this conversation ahead. We want to talk about some flaws. We talked about this live with John before we went live. Noah Fant's blocking last year was not great. He's actually developed into a serviceable blocker. He's shown improvement in that area every single game. KJ Hamler, his improvement within his role and his hands, his route running has improved dramatically. Jerry Judy,
his hands, but his route running has.
Oh, that's true. Regardless, the drop issues have dropped off at least a little bit over the last few games. That one big drop that he had against the Kansas City Chiefs, that ball is a little bit out in front, and that's a tough catch to make. I won't fault him for that. It's one he has to make, but at the same time, it's a tough catch. Jerry Judy had those key drops early in the season, especially in the Titans game, that 3rd and 11 crossing route that killed the drive and the Broncos had to punt. We're seeing some growth within these guys, specifically player to player. We're not seeing that growth with Drew Lock right now, and I understand that you got to have some patience and let him develop a little bit. But every other young player is growing and developing. Lloyd Cushenberry had issues in pass protection. He's shored those up. He still gets pushed back because he's not strong enough in this game, but still, he's developing. Dalton Reisner had struggles in the running game. He's a mauler up front right now. Garrett Bowles has developed again. His pass protection is amazing this year. There's development incrementally between every single player in a synergistic value, but the quarterback is the guy that's failing. He's not doing what he needs to do as a true franchise quarterback. You can argue the youth, you can argue the offseason, you can argue whatever you want to. Game by game progression matters, and we're not seeing it.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And real quick, there was just a couple other comments that I wanted to get. And somebody made a comment about how Dylan Moses falling to the second and he hasn't been playing that good. That's not true. Dylan Moses has been playing really good this year. He's still having issues of overthinking, but not a single person, not a single scout, not a single member of any team, organization, none of my sources or anything like that have mentioned anything about him falling out of the second. It has been consistently that he is at the very least a top 15 player. Now, of course, there's still time to go about that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the injury stuff, that still has to be kind of figured out and everything. And the medical checks at the combine, depending on how they do that this next year, that will be a big deal into that. Yeah. And then there was one other thing here that I saw, and it was before we get to that super chat is why is Judy getting no targets? The last few weeks, he's been targeted quite a bit. He had, I think, like 8 targets against the Chiefs. He was targeted quite a bit. He's just been the decoy, though. That's been his biggest thing. He's been the decoy route. He's the one that's trying to draw attention to open up somebody else because he's been hurt, because he hasn't been at full health. And that's one thing that I actually can't complain about with Pat Shurmur for, is when offensive player is hurt. That's what they did with Noah Fant. You don't want them to take hits unnecessarily, so you kind of use them as the decoy to draw attention and everything to try to help open up somebody else.
I'm looking it up right now, but I think I'm fairly positive on this that Jerry Judy's actually leading the team in targets this year. Like, he has the most targets of any wide receiver in the on the Broncos roster. Part of that's because he's been banged up, but he's played every game. But also they're actually targeting him a lot. He has less than 50% catch on that, but it's not necessarily his fault. He's getting open. Locke's missing him or whatever. There's some drops, whatever the case may be. Regardless, Jerry Judy's getting plenty of his share. The one catch for 5 yards against the Chiefs, that's an anomaly. Coming into the game, outside of the New Orleans game where no one got targeted because it was terrible, Jerry Judy's production and target rate at that time was the highest it's been as a Bronco. So that's a notion that we need to just put to bed. Mohammed coming in here on Super Chat. I love the idea of training for Darnold. How much do you think he will cost? I just broke this down a minute. I'm going to say one more thing. And Eric, maybe you heard something different. According to Benjamin Albright on Broncos Country tonight, NFL Insider, he says that the current market is at least a 3rd round pick. 3rd and a 5 will probably get it done. That market's probably going to rise. I see that I could see the Indianapolis Colts. I could see the San Francisco 49ers jumping in on that to try to jump in and drive that price a little bit higher. Eric, what do you think the market is, and what would you give up for Sam Darnold?
I really wouldn't go more than 2/3 over 2 years, really. He's getting to the point where he's towards the end of being cost-controlled, and has played this year. He has struggled quite a bit. There has been some good, but there's been a lot of bad as well. But the question is, how much of that is Adam Gase? And then also the question is with here, I'm going to go off on Pat Shurmur for a little bit. Is Pat Shurmur the right guy to fix him? And I don't think he is.
Right.
And so that's another issue too. And then there was one other comment too that I saw that I missed earlier, and it was about screens and Pat Shurmur not using screens. Screens are more and more becoming a negative play for offenses. As defenses get faster and more aware and smarter, the success rates of screen passes are going down. And Vic Fangio actually had a comment about that, about how I don't know the full quote, but his comment was along the lines of, it was nice to see a screenplay actually work. And it's because that screenplays more and more are becoming unsuccessful and negative plays for the offense. In general, there are some teams that still do them extremely well, but those teams are more outliers than the rule, really.
Right.
Now, getting to if Denver goes 1-3.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's move this up.
This is one where obviously Denver wins one game, whether it's the Chargers. This is what I think that the most likely scenario is for the Broncos. They'll probably be picking not quite top 6, but probably like 7 to 10-ish, 7 to 11, somewhere in that range if they end up going 5-11. and it's very much the same. If a quarterback falls to them, you should consider it. I think if they win at least one game, I think that's a reason to go more veteran at quarterback than going to the draft, and then using your draft positioning to either trade down and get some good value with picks in return, or going and boosting your defense. Because one issue that I have with the Broncos over the last few years is the lack of attention spent to keep their defense young, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if they don't do that, then they're not bringing this youth on offense, and they needed that. They needed the youth infusion of that on the offensive side of the ball. But they also need it on the defensive side of the ball. Kareem Jackson's getting older. Jarrell Casey's getting older. Shelby Harris is getting older. They have a bunch of impending free agents. Von Miller's getting older. Bradley Chubb, his play has been hit or miss this season a lot. Curious to see what he's going to be able to do next year. Hopefully he takes that step forward like I thought he was going to this year, even just coming off the injury. And maybe that was a bit foolish on my part. And linebacker, that's still a concern. They drafted Justin Cernod, but we didn't see him this year. So I think that's a good point to trade down, pick a couple of picks this year, and help build this defense. Get younger, get cheaper, and better the depth, because we're seeing it this year that the depth, they're doing all right, but I think it's more Vic Fangio's scheme than actual talent.
Yeah. I think a lot of it, to me, depends on exactly what pick that is. It depends on where the Broncos are actually selecting, and there's tiebreakers and stuff like that. I think the Broncos, with their high strength of schedule, they're going to get kind of screwed over on that. If they do go 5-11, they're going to be picking in the bottom range of that 7-11 spectrum, because it's obvious. If you have a tough schedule, you're probably going to lose more games. If you have a weaker schedule, you lose more games. That means you have worse talent or worse situations. So it's a double-edged sword there. If they're picking at the bottom end of that spectrum, and they're not inside the top 10, I would much rather see them trade down. Even if they're at 10, I would much rather see them trade down. And the big thing to me here is targeting a cornerback. If Caleb Farley's there for you at 10, you almost have to run to the table and go make that selection, especially with the Bouye situation. Get some more youth in the secondary. Obviously, Aseng Bassi being out this week is going to be huge. Bryce Callahan, we're not sure with what his contractual situation is. Michael Ojemudia has struggled, but has shown some flashes of quality play. You got to get another cornerback, and the depth of this room was a big issue this year, coming into this year, and they've overachieved for the most part. But to me, you have to go get that cornerback. Obviously, another inside linebacker, Dylan Moses there, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. There's another guy, I think, as well. But this is actually, if you're going to go offensive lineman in this situation, I think there's a guy that you can go and get. And it might be considered a little bit of a reach for you. I know you like that Darisaw kid from Virginia Tech, but I'm looking Alex Leatherwood here, because I think that you can move him over to the left side. Well, I think you can move him over to the left side. And like I said, it might be a little bit of a reach here, but if you move him over to the right side and use him as a developmental piece, I think you could probably get some luck out of that. Darisaw, do you think he can play on the right?
I think Darisaw can play on both sides. I think that he's got more versatility to play either side than Leatherwood does. Okay, then there you go. Since you're talking about corners, actually, this is actually a perfect comment, because I was actually going to ask a question like this. So CC says, will Fangio draft a corner in the first, though? Well, Vic Fangio, as a defensive coordinator, he's never drafted a pure corner in the first round. He drafted two versatile defensive backs in Jimmy Ward and Erick Reed when he was with San Francisco, but he's never drafted a true corner.
Did he draft Jaquiski Tartt? Did he draft Jaquiski Tartt?
I don't remember. I don't think so. I think he was with the Chicago Bears at that time. Okay. I'm not positive, though.
That would have been a third one, though, by the way.
Yeah, of a versatile defensive back. And so I think Caleb Farley, Vic Fangio, he's shown that he will rather go get not the top guy, but a better scheme fit. Caleb Farley, he's a top guy who's also a scheme fit. So this could be a year where they finally do that.
Right.
But if they go with that versatile defensive back, even pick it in the top 10, I think this guy's going to rise, especially over the final part of the draft process. Paris Ford out of Pittsburgh.
There you go.
Now, Kareem Jackson's age, he's 32, going on 33, I believe. He's a free agent after next year. Paris Ford is basically Kareem Jackson 2.0. He can drop down. He can play in the nickel. He can play two high safety. He can even play a little bit of a single high. He can play in the box. He's tough as nails. He'll lay the wood. He's got good technique to wrap up and everything like that. So I think that kind of piece, that versatility that he brings, like that really could be a piece for Vic Fangio, especially with how much he likes those versatile defensive backs. Jimmy Ward, Eric Reed, Paris Ford is not too dissimilar from them.
What about that Holland kid from Oregon, that safety from Oregon?
I think the first round is a little bit rich for him.
Really?
That would be a guy who, like in the second round, that'd probably be one to consider there. Only other safety I'd consider in the first round, and it'd be after a trade down, is Trevon Moehrig, which I saw that the one comment from, I believe, CC also mentioned him as well. My issue with him is that he's more of a center fielder. I mean, he does have the versatility to do a little bit of everything, but I think that his best role in the NFL will be a true center fielder, similar to Earl Thomas. Not as good as Earl Thomas, but that kind of role.
Okay. I actually like Trevon Moehrig a lot. He also brings some punt return versatility, which is something that the Broncos desperately need. Someone that's not just a punt returner. Deontay Spencer, get off my roster, please. Trevon Moehrig, it's scheme fit too. Like I actually like him a lot. Let's move the conversation to the speaking of top 10 here, top 10, top 11. The Broncos go 1-3, even if they pick it like the 12 range. Edge defender at this particular spot. This is a good spot. What's your opinion on Joseph Osai? Is that his first name?
Joseph
Osai.
Out of Texas?
Yep.
I like him. He's my number 2 edge. I like him a little bit more than Jason Owe, who's my number 3, and Kwity Paye, who's my number 4 edge. But any one of those guys, like just Gregory Rousseau, any one of those 4, man, they can go in. They fit in with what Vic Fangio wants to do. I mean, edge guys like that, they have the versatility. I think Jason Owe is a little bit big for the kind of role that they're looking for the edge. He's more Bradley Chubb, and they're kind of looking for more of a Von Miller. And I think that Kwity Paye, who plays about 275, I think that he's got a little bit of that tweener to him for the Vic Fangio defense, so that's going to be something that you watch out for as well. But I mean, those aren't the only guys, but those are the 4, or those aren't the only edges, but in that range, those are the only 4 I would consider. Joseph Osai, he can bend the corner. Gregory Rousseau, I mean, he's just a raw athletic freak of nature. I don't think he can end up on a tier like Myles Garrett or the Bosa brothers, but I think that he is a poor man version of Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, when he was coming out, he was very raw, athletic freak and everything, just needed the technique to be built. Gregory Rousseau, I think he has that same kind of thing, just not as high of a ceiling. Now, Aziz Ogilari, he's another one of those edges that I was talking about. This is a great edge class. I really love this edge class. Aziz Ogilari, he's a guy who he's a little light. He's only like 240 pounds, but you can't really tell. He doesn't get bullied as often as you think he would when you're looking at his size, especially against the run. And he can turn the corner. He's got really good bend. And then Quincy Roche he's another one out of Miami. Patrick Jones, a guy out of Pittsburgh. Like there's a lot of good edges. All of them can fit with what Denver needs up front, and a lot of and be versatile with what they do. And I think one guy that would be very underrated, or that's going under the radar, that would be a good pick for them, probably in the second, third round, would be Victor Dimukeje out of Duke.
Ooh, I remember that name from last year, actually. Victor Dimukeje, yeah, I remember that name from last year. All right, so now let's go forward just a little bit here. The Broncos pick it 2-2. That means 11-13, 12-14, somewhere around in there. Really kind of the same conversation, guys. So talking about the same guys. Looking at edge, quarterback, offensive tackle, potentially a safety, versatile defensive back. But where it kind of gets fun is when you go 3-1, say the Broncos end in 7-9, they're going to be in the 14-18 range, somewhere around in there. Eric, what about the cornerback class in that particular range strikes your intrigue?
Now, I know our colleague Nick Kittle, he's a little bit higher on Eric Stokes than I am, and he likes him in this range. For me, there's no other corner that fits with what Vic Fangio wants to do that fits in that range. Okay. This would be, again, Paris Ford. This would be a range I'd be looking at him if you want to go defensive back. But still, in this range, you're still looking at linebacker. And I think that this opens up the possibility for a couple other linebackers or even trading down. And, I mean, on that same note, too, I mean, Christian Darrisaw, Dylan Radins, those guys become a little bit more possible here, at least in my opinion right now, based off of how I have my board set at this moment. But I think that this would be a really good year for Denver to trade down. I don't think that it's a great draft at the top. I think there's like 3 or 4 guys in that tier 1 of this class. And I think that there's a lot of like good 20, 30 players in that tier 2 of this draft class. Like it's really strong. I think from pick 7 to about pick 43 or so, I really love how this class looks.
Yeah, it's a really good point. should we consider the interior defensive line position?
This is actually one that I actually had debated with a colleague, Nick Kendall, about. I think that, so defensive line is you typically take 1.5 to 2.5 years to really develop as a player.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It takes time. It's probably one of the longer transitions for it because there's a lot more you have to learn. And I mean, college, you typically stick to a lot more to just one gapping or two gapping. NFL, you do a little bit more. And then what you're being asked to do is a little bit different as well. So I could see it. I mean, Shelby Harris, he's possibly leaving. Jarrell Casey, I don't think he's back with Denver next year. DeMarcus Walker, he's gone. Draymond Jones, he's playing well, but he hasn't taken those big steps forward that you want to see after a year and a half. But again, it takes that time. Next year, really. McTelvin Ajim, he hasn't shown the progress needed really this year either. But again, takes time. So, yeah, you definitely could consider it. But my thing is that right now, there's only one defensive lineman I'd consider as a first-round pick, like true interior defensive lineman I consider as a first-round pick, and that's Jordan Davis. And with Mike Purcell re-signed, I don't see the need for Jordan Davis. I think that he's that 0-1 technique in the base that can slide over and play that 3-4-eye technique in Vic Fangio's defense. And with Mike Purcell, you just don't need that full-time. Davion Nixon, to please Nick here, he's the guy that I'd be considering round 2. I really like Jalen Twyman out of Pittsburgh as well. I absolutely love the Pittsburgh defense, by the way.
That Pittsburgh defense is ridiculously stacked with NFL talent right now. They're playing so well, too. Man, Pittsburgh looks really good this year. Now, I've got a question here, and I'm gonna appease Bawana, Mr. John Cronenberg, MHH, and he's asking about a specific Colorado Buffalo and Nate Landman, and should the Broncos Kenneth Booker in here with the actual question. Where does Nate Landman of CU get drafted, and should the Broncos think of selecting him, or do his talents not translate to the NFL?
So in like the last week or two, I've had 4 people ask me that question, and Buono was actually one of them. He sent me a DM on Twitter about it, and my response has all been the same. I don't think he gets drafted, and I don't think he should. He's not really built for the modern NFL linebacker position. I think he could have a role as a special teams linebacker and be a okay depth piece if you have him in the right role. But I don't think he doesn't offer up to be a starter in this. He doesn't offer up to be that number 3 guy. Limited special teams role, limited defensive role. That just doesn't bode well and just points to going undrafted. And I don't think Broncos should take him. I think they have enough types of him that are better versions of him, and Josie Jewell, Alexander Johnson.
Yeah, that's fair. The interesting thing about this draft class, guys, is that the Broncos, there's a lot of holes. But the thing is, it's mostly future holes. Like, if you really look at this roster top to bottom, the edge position, the cornerback position are probably the top tier needs the Broncos have, especially quarterback, depending on what you think of Drew Lock. I digress from that conversation. But really, it's a future need for the most part. And it's interesting to talk about this because there's a really good question here. And I don't necessarily want to where did it go? Sorry, let me see if I can find it. Adam Grigo comes in here and he says, who do you think the Broncos should get in the second round? And this is kind of to my point here. There's a lot of needs for this Broncos team to have, but it's all depth and future stuff. Like there's a good foundation on both offense and defense, really. It's a lot of depth things. So this is actually one of those, and I know Nick Kendall is going to pound his chest and just jump up and down if he hears this. Where the best player available, regardless of position, if you have a best player available, go and pick him. Like, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you can target an edge defender. You can target a cornerback. You probably should. You should probably target a developmental offensive lineman, an offensive tackle, a guy that can play swing. And there's some need to go and get another linebacker. But really, with what the Broncos have right now, a 3-down linebacker. Justin Sternad's coming back next year. We don't know what his impact's going to be. You've got the interior of the defensive line. There's a lot of talent that's coming in here. Draymond Jones is growing up. He's actually playing very well. DeMarcus Walker, what do the Broncos do with him next year? Do they let him walk or they bring him back? You've got McTelvin Agim that's been playing at least decently in his rotational role. So there's some youth to be had there. Shelby Harris, Marcel is going to come back healthy. Another depth piece there, but are you going to make that as a priority? Probably not. Offensive line, you have your 5 starters. You have a couple of guys on the backside of that, backup guys that are developmental guys, Elijah Wilkinson being one of them. You might go back and sign in a DeMar Dotson to come back and play as your backup tackle. He's already displayed interest in doing so. So do you really need to go and draft an offensive tackle in the top 10? Probably not. So really, it's your opinion of Drew Lock, or take the best player available on the defensive side of the football and reap the rewards.
Is in the second round, picking high in the second round, you look at your board, you look at your players that are left. If any of them have a first round grade from your team, from your scouting department on them, you take them. That's what you do in the second round. If there's none left, then you don't ever draft by need. You look at the best player available. And one thing that always gets forgotten is that John Elway, for the most part, always tries to go into the draft without major obvious needs. And he likes to try to draft by best player available at a position of need. So that's something to look at. And I see a couple comments about drafting a quarterback late and to push Drew Lock. And if you're drafting a quarterback day 3, he's not there to push your starter.
No.
If you want to push your starter, you're taking a guy either round 1, round 2, or round 3, and that's it. That's how you're going to push your starting quarterback. Anybody else you're looking at as a developmental backup, developmental guy to possibly in a couple of years push for a starting job, but most likely push to be your backup quarterback. That's what you're looking at day 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah, just another guy to fill out the roster depth. I'm frantically searching for a comment here, and I saw it, and I actually got it here. I saw it the first time, and for some reason I read Desmond Ridder, and the comment says, if we have to draft a quarterback in the later rounds, it's not going to be later rounds if you want Desmond Ridder, but Diamond Rattler comes in here and makes that point. Desmond Ridder, Eric, talk to me about your boy.
So I did a Mile High mailbag this week, and one of the questions was about possible first-round quarterbacks. And I don't think Desmond Ridder ends up as a first-round quarterback, but there's been a lot of conversation that he can push for it, so I included him in. I really like him, and I would, late first round, I definitely consider it, get that 5th-year option on him. I think that he would be a really good guy to push Drew Lock. Him or Carson Strong, a Nevada quarterback if he declares, either one of those guys I think would be perfect quarterbacks to push Drew Lock, because I think that they offer up a higher ceiling. They have a little bit of a lower floor than Drew Lock, but their styles of play aren't drastically different compared to Drew Lock, to where you're not making big changes to your scheme for it.
Yeah. I don't know. I like the talent. There's a lot of upside there. I really do. There's a lot of upside with Desmond Ridder. All right. 4-0, the Broncos go 8-8. Outside looking in on the playoffs more than likely, but if they get the help, they could be in the playoffs looking at the 20s. My guy, Dancing Bear, left tackle for the Texas Longhorns, Samuel Cosmi. What do you think about an offensive tackle there?
Too early.
And too early?
Too early
okay.
for Samuel Cosmi specifically. He's a guy that – okay, so you mentioned earlier about looking for that developmental tackle, round 2.
Yep.
Samuel Cosmi, I can get behind that, round 2.
Okay.
Looking at him to be your developmental tackle. I think that he offers up enough versatility to play either side. My fear is that I see a lot of Ty Sambraila with his style.
Okay. You know what? I actually agree with that. I really do.
I'm not a big fan of him. I have a lot of questions if he has the strength really to succeed in the NFL.
That's fair.
But if you're picking in this weird range, because 8-8 could get Denver into the playoffs, but it may not. It's just a weird range for him, and there's really not that much changes. Again, one of those safeties, Trevin Moehrig, I think that this would be a point to start considering him a little bit. Slight reach, but to go get your guy, sometimes you do got to do a slight reach. Linebackers like Chaz Surratt, he becomes a little bit more of an option there. It opens up the opportunity for more edges. And actually, it opens up a thing for another interior defensive line. I forgot about him. He is also a first-round guy for me. Jay Tofelli out of USD, I think that's how you say his name. I forgot about him because he opted out this year. And for me, he's not the best scheme fit for Denver, but he's a guy that have him bulk up a little bit, and he can fit very well in Vic Fangio's defense. It opens up a lot more, but again, it's a lot of the same names that we just mentioned.
Yeah. Here's a new one for you. And I'm looking through some of these big boards. I've got the tankathon.com big boards, to take with that what you will, draftpick.com, the PFF big board as well. Tulsa linebacker or edge, Zaven Collins. What about that young man? That's a big, bulky body right there and moves very well.
So for him he's going to be that Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins type linebacker in the NFL, at least in my opinion. And Vic Fangio's defense just doesn't use that. Like, I really love his play, and I would love to see him be a Bronco, but it's going to need a big change from Vic Fangio. And Vic Fangio, as much as I say that coaches should adjust to the strengths of their players, he's not one that really does that. He's doing a little bit this year, but it's more not really adjusting to his players' strengths. He's adjusting to cover up for the issues that they're having with the injuries and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't really see him as a fit for it. Not for the schemer thing. I think that Brian Flores, I think the Miami Dolphins, they just make so much sense to me. I think the New England Patriots,
that's a good point.
Teams that implement this defense that's very similar to what the Patriots have run for years. One team to look out for, though, is the Kansas City Chiefs, because they're starting to implement a scheme like that a little bit more often, and the Oakland Raiders, which if he goes to either one of those, I'd be kind of annoyed with.
Yeah. So here's another interesting question, and we got it earlier in talking about the Broncos draft and wide receiver. What do you think Rashad Bateman or Devontae Smith would look like in the Broncos uniform?
I'm not a big fan of Devontae Smith with the Broncos. I mean, he's just redundant.
That's fair.
He's a good route runner. I don't think he offers up as athletic upside as Jerry Judy does. And he's one that the combine testing is going to be big for me. I just have a lot of issues with how he looks in it on tape. Not saying he's a bad athlete, but I don't think he's going to be as good of one as Jerry Judy. But his route running is great, but it's just redundant. Rashad Bateman, I think that he would be a good fit with them, but again, he becomes a little bit redundant if you keep Tim Patrick, if you keep Cortland Sutton. It's just a little bit of redundancy there. If they do go a wide receiver, I think that Rondale Moore would actually be the best way to go for them.
Okay,
but yeah, that's just my take. And there is one comment here I want to address. And Guy University, how do you sign a failed coach? Talking about Pat Shermer, he did absolutely nothing with an above-average Giants team. That Giants team was not above average. That Giants team was bad. That offensive line is bottom 3. That defense has been bottom 3. They had really a lack of talent completely. Like, it was a bad unit. And I know a lot's being made about Odell Beckham Jr.'s comments about him and everything like that. But Odell Beckham Jr. was a prima donna, and while Pat Shermer was in the wrong with what he did, Odell Beckham Jr. caused a lot of problems internally as well, which is why Pat Shermer was responding the way he was. But yeah, that Giants team was not above average by no means. They were a bad team.
Well, I believe in Pat Shermer's first year, he still had Eli Manning at quarterback, who was the ghost of himself. Like, you want to talk about a struggling quarterback behind a struggling offensive line, give all the excuses to Drew Lock. Like, where's the excuses to Eli Manning then? Pat Shermer actually did a lot of really good things, and Odell Beckham Jr. looked really good. Then he blew his ankle up, and they leaned on Saquon Barkley because they had to. They didn't have anybody else. Eli Manning was absolutely god-awful. Their offensive line was terrible. Like, that team was that's a no offense to Guy University. That's a terrible take, man. I'm not even trying to call you out or nothing. That's bad. That's bad, man. Understand the situation there.
Last thing before we get out here, at least for me, is Bonnet came in with a really good question, and I'm surprised no one's actually asked it. We've been talking about the draft.
The next one I was going to bring up. Yep.
How much will the combine affect draft stock this year with opt-outs? Don't know. No idea. And the simple reason for that is we have no idea what they're going to do this year for the combine. With everything going on, it's going to be a weird year. I think it'll be no idea. It's hard to say. If they have a combine in some sorts with the testing and all that, which I'm sure they will, it's going to be hard because of the players who opted out. Because a lot of the guys who opted out, they had a lot that they needed to show this year that they didn't, that they can't answer in the combine. So it's going to be an interesting year. I think it's just as big as every other year, but not as big as every other year, if that makes sense. And Charlie Beagle made a comment about Pat could ruin a McRib. I tried a McRib for the first time last night. Terrible. Hated it. I don't get why the McRib is as hyped up as it is. I'm fat. I like my rib. I like my barbecue. That was terrible.
All right, I gotta answer the question to Wannabes in kind of a different way. Obviously, we're not sure exactly how everything's going to happen and play out with the opt-outs, but to me, I think they need to expand this year. And I know how crazy that sounds with everything going on in the world and CV and stuff like that. They need to expand the combine this year and get some more players into it and let some more players show their athletic ability, especially the guys that opted out that were eligible to play for this year. The reason why I say that is just because of that. There's a lot of players that didn't get a chance to play. Expand it to the players that did play and then the players that opted out as well. Get yourself another 50 to 75 players in there to get a full evaluation, get some more interviews, get like what's going on behind the scenes, ask how you worked out and stuff like that. Like the combine can be such a huge tool, such a big building tool. They need to expand it a little bit, at least this year, open up some more days where you can get some more interviews and stuff going on. Expand the coverage of it a little bit, monetize because the cap's going to go down, so get some more revenue coming in to redistribute the wealth there. Like there's a lot of different things that, especially this year, the combine can be used as a major tool, not only for the scouting community and for the scouting departments of these front offices, but for the front offices and teams to be able to continue to grow this league even further.
Now, I actually had an idea about how to do the combine this year, and I don't think it would be even an option for the NFL. But what you do, instead of having it at the end of February like they always do, start at the end of January. Since a lot of the bowl games aren't going to happen.
Yep.
Start at the end of January or the beginning week of February and have it be split up with position groups over a month and a half.
Yeah.
So, with everything that's going on, to keep the social distancing and all that stuff like that, week one, you have your quarterbacks in. You have them split into very small groups. You can do your interviews. You can do your medicals. You can do your testing. Then as they're leaving, you bring in your next group. Again, do the same thing. Then your next group, the same thing. Spread it out over a longer time and just go with that. Keep coverage going all the time about it. Give a chance to show more of it, show more of the drills because their coverage every year is always so rushed. Go do a little bit more with what they do with drills and just give a chance for these teams because this is the best way to help out those who opted out or players who missed games because of injury and they only had one game to show what they do or what they could do or anything like that. Expand the drills, give them a better opportunity, give them more time in the spotlight, and just expand it. Like, don't try to cram it into into what, 6 days, typically 7 a week.
Yeah, it's like 9 days, I think, technically, because they throw the punt.
All the entry stuff and everything. Split it up over, let's say, 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good idea because then you can keep
Whoppers. No.
I see the chat going on over here. Our local Maverick makes a better barbecue rib sandwich than McDonald's does. I'm just going to put that out there point blank. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for us. We just hit our hour mark. Thank you all for joining the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Six matters of business, guys. Make sure you guys are following us on Twitter at Sanderson MHH at Erick Trickel. If you have any questions, guys, please don't be afraid. Tweet at us, retweet us, shoot us a DM. My DMs are open. Shoot us some questions, and we love to continue to talk football with you guys. While you're at it,
real quick, just to interrupt us, shoot Lance some DMs because he always complains because I get DMs quite a bit, and he never does, and he always complains about it. So do me a favor, make Lance feel so loved a little bit and shoot him a DM.
This is very true. I actually say this all the time. Nick and Carl, I got a DM the other day. I haven't had a DM from a fan and I don't even know how long other than, hey, by the way, great show. Come at me, guys, please. I'm begging you. Please do. While you're at it, anyways, follow at DVDD_pod at Mile High Huddle for instant news and analysis on your Denver Broncos. HuddleUpPod.com. Push yourself that way. Go get yourself a hat. Get yourself a T-shirt, hit the merch tent, whatever you got to do. support the show that way is a great way to do it. Facebook as well, become a supporter there. Easiest things you guys can do if you're not willing to do so that way. Subscribe wherever you guys are watching, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Leave us a comment. I'm always jumping in on YouTube to jump into the comments to talk with you guys. So whatever you're doing, subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys get. And if you love it, share it. Share it to everybody in Broncos country. Get as many fans in front of us as possible so we can continue to deliver amazing content like we had tonight. Eric, before we get out of here, any last words?
Let's see here. Nitwit, Audiment, something, and Tweak. I can't remember what they are. It's Harry Potter.
I was going to say that's some Harry Potter.
I
got it.
May the force be with you all.
Yeah. Mooney, Pat,
and
Wormtail, and Bronx.
Happy birthday to Mr. Chad Jensen.
Yes. Well, happy birthday to Chad for today. It is the boss's birthday today. It is my birthday tomorrow.
We got to get out of here. Lance, we got to get out of here.
It is happy birthday to the king himself. If it's not for him, then we don't have a platform to do this. Honestly, to Chad, thank you very much for everything you do. Happy birthday. Stay blessed, my man.
And happy birthday.
We'll talk at you later. Thank you, Eric. I do appreciate that. No, I don't eat gas station hot dogs. That's probably the worst thing you could ever do. We actually have a good gas station where I live, and they make their food like fresh every single day. It's really good stuff, I'm telling you. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for us. Thank you once again for joining the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Y'all stay safe. Take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. And as always, go Broncos. We'll see you guys next week. Same time, safe place.
Join Broncos Country's Deep Divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.